Last class, we learned a number of things about spreadsheets. We learned they have columns, which are denoted by the letters at the top, and rows that are denoted by the numbers here on the side. So for example, this cell that I've clicked in right now is cell A2. I can see that up there. This one is C2. This one is B11. And this one is D10. We looked at some data that was collected by one of the groups here, and what we wanted to do was find out a little bit more about how many different answers were given in column H. And we learned a new function that was called unique. So in spreadsheets, we have functions, and we could do this without a function too. So let me just show you here. We can sort columns. So I could click up here and sort it A to Z. And now everything is alphabetical from A down to T in this case. We can see art, drama, English, I don't know, lunch, math, 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 music, not sure, tech, tech, tech. So we can see everything was organized there. I'm going to undo that though, because there's, as I said, a function that can help us do this better. And so here's what I'm going to do. Just remind you how we did that. So every function, as I said yesterday, starts with an equals sign. That's sort of a special character that lets the spreadsheet know that we're about to type in a formula. And the formula we learned was called unique. So I'm going to go ahead and just start typing it, and you can see there's a few other options that come up, and then I'll click on unique. And then we need to give it some parameters. We first need to give it a range. That means which cells it's going to be looking at, and then after that we're going to give it no, we're just going to give it a range, sorry. So unique, and we'll give it a range. So we'll see, we want to look at all unique items in, and I'm just going to start clicking and drag down, and it'll do it automatically for me. But you can see it puts H2 because that's the first cell I clicked on, and then colon H16. So it's going to be any unique item that was listed in there. There was a great question yesterday where you would maybe make the assumption that unique means it only has come up once and not a number of times, but unique means it just removes all of the extra answers. So it'll give us only one of these maths. You can see there's 1, 2, and 3, and 4. But we found that there was a problem when we ran it, that we actually saw math come up more times than we expected. It's coming up 3 times. You can see it's listed 1, 2, 3, and 4 times here, but it's coming up 3 times over here. And we figured out, well, that's because unique, the function unique, treats every single character differently. So for example, this is an uppercase M, this is a lowercase m, and this is all uppercase. So it's treating them as 3 unique instances of math. So what we figured out we had to do first is squash everything down into its lowercase value. So let's do that. We're going to use a function that's called lower. And lower converts a specified string. Remember, we learned yesterday that string is just another fancy word for a bunch of letters stuck together. It could be a word or a sentence. And so let's go ahead and choose that. And the way that works is we just give it one cell, and it returns the lowercase value of that. And you can see, so lunch becomes lunch with a lowercase. But it is smart enough to say, hey, do you also want to do this to all the values that follow? So it's saying we can autofill this formula for you. And by pushing the check mark there, it does it automatically. So you can see if I click in this cell, the formula for that cell is equals lower H2. So it's referring to this cell H2, and it takes it, makes it lowercase, so that uppercase L becomes a lowercase l. Does the same thing here. So now it's in cell I3, the formula is lower H3, so it takes the value of what's in H3 and creates a lowercase. So essentially, it's just our column I now is just taking all of the subjects listed in column H, and it's changing it to its lowercase form. All right, what we want to do next is we want to find out, all right, what are all the different unique answers that have occurred over here in column I? And so, again, I can say unique. And I can just type that in if I want. And remember, unique takes a range. Now you'll notice there's this little question mark here. It says turn on formula help. If I click there, it actually tells me what it is expecting to see. So the unique function wants a range, and a range looks like this, where you start with one cell, colon, another cell. And it has two other parameters that it takes as well, which we won't be using in this particular example. So I'm going to just go ahead and drag down to give it the range, and then close my bracket and hit return. And so here we can see now these are all our unique values here. Lunch, tech, not sure, art, math, I don't know, English, not sure, music, drama. So some of these things are kind of the same as well. So not sure is kind of the same as I don't know and not sure. So it's possible that we might want to manipulate the data a little bit more, but we won't do that right now, so that things like not sure and I don't know became the same thing. But for now, we'll just treat them as different. Okay, that's what we learned yesterday. Here's what we're going to learn today. We're going to go and figure out how to count the number of times that math has come up over here. So we could go through and count 1, 2, 3, and 4. It comes up 4 different times here in H, or if I'm looking at our lowercase, again, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to refer only to the lowercase column now because it'll help when we are doing our next function. So I can look down, and sure, it's easy. I can count how many times does math come up. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's easy to see. But sometimes you're working with data that is pages and pages long, and it's not easy just to go and read and see how many people answered something. And so you might want to count. And so here's how we do that. So just like there was a function here to make this lowercase, and just like we used a function unique here, which actually fills multiple rows, you can see these ones all get filled automatically. Just if I erase that for just 1 second, you can see all the following entries also get erased. And if I come in here and try and erase something, delete cell, it will just create a problem because the data is being inserted automatically by this function unique up here. All right, there is a function that can help us count the number of times the word lunch comes up in column I. Now I can see it's just 1, so that's good. When we're learning functions, being able to eyeball and understand what the correct answer is first to make sure functions are working properly is good. It's sometimes good when you're writing functions in a spreadsheet to work with a really small data set so that you understand it's functioning properly before you go ahead and apply it to all your data so that you really understand how it works. Okay, so we're going to learn a new function right now, and that function is called CountIf. So, again, every function starts with an equal sign, and there is a function called CountIf. And you got to spell it right. So CountIf, a conditional across a range. So what does it want? It wants us to give it a range and then a criterion. So what does that mean? We're going to specify what range is it going to look in for something, and the criterion will be the thing we're looking for. So in this case, we're going to look for the word lunch in this list, and it's going to count if it sees the word lunch. So it'll go through, it'll say 1, and then it won't see the word lunch again, so nothing else will come up. So let's start by giving it the range we want it to look in. So we want it to look in this range. When you have multiple things that you put into a function, they are separated by a comma. So you can see there's the range, comma, and then the criterion. If you look down here, there's an example. So it's saying, in this example, it looks through a column starting at A1 and going to A10, and it counts any number that's greater than 20. That's what that is looking for in this particular example. In our example, we just want to look for the word lunch, the typed word lunch. Really what I want to do is I want to say, okay, find what's in J2. Okay, so J2, we found our unique item and created a list of only our unique answers. So let's see what happens now. Okay, there we go. So it finds one instance of the word lunch. And again, we're getting our autofill thing coming up, and I can go ahead and just push the check mark here and it'll fill these in automatically. So tech comes up 3 times. Let's count. 1, 2, and 3. So that's correct. And then all these other ones. Now I'm going to go and undo that for just a second because that autofill doesn't always come up. And it's different than when unique automatically filled everything below here for us. Because every cell, in the case of a CountIf, needs to be filled in manually, or it needs to be filled in. It doesn't do it automatically, the way that unique did. So when I filled in unique here, it automatically filled everything below it. But that's not the case with CountIf here. So let's say CountIf. We want it to count if it sees the item J2, and then we'll push return. Okay, and we're not going to autofill here because I want you to see that you can copy the cell, click the cell below, and say paste, and it will automatically change a few things. So it pastes the cell, but it's smart enough to know a couple of things. So check this out. Actually, it's smart enough to know some things, but not all things. Let's see what happens here. So in cell 1, we have I2 to I16, and that is looking through here, and it's looking for this value. If I click down here, you can see it's smart enough to know, oh, this time we want to look for the word tech, and we're looking from J. The word tech is located in J3 here, but you'll notice it made a mistake. It updated my range too. It incremented the numbers in the range from I3 to I17, which means it's looking from here to there. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. In this particular instance, it's not incorrect. However, it's going to break later. So we want to make sure that doesn't change. We always want it to look through not this range. We want it to look from I2 to I16. Now, a way to make sure that our formula doesn't break like that is we go back to the original formula. And instead of having it look from I2 to I2 to I16, what we're going to do instead is we're going to say we want to search the entire I column. And here's how we do that. We just push I:, I. And you can see everything gets highlighted over here. So now it's going to look through every single row in column I for whatever is in J2. And if it equals J2, it will count the number of times it sees it. So now let's push return. 1. So we're getting the right answer. Now when I copy this cell and paste the cell below, it works perfectly. It's still looking through the entire column I for whatever is in J3, which in this case is tech, and it counts how many times it sees it, which is 3 times, which is why we see 3 down here in the cell. It incremented the number of the cell that we're referencing without causing problems over here. That's a common problem that comes up in spreadsheets and something you have to be careful of. All right, so now that I know my formula is working properly, I'm going to paste it the rest of the way down the column. So I'll start by clicking in the cell and dragging down to where I want it to go. And I'm just going to choose Edit and Paste. And we should get numbers counted for the rest of these items. So I'm going to go ahead and just eyeball, make sure the formula looks like it's working right. So CountIf I J2, CountIf I to I J3, J4. I'm basically looking at that J5, making sure it's always referencing the cell just to the left here. All right, and I can reformat. You can change the size of columns by dragging them around like that. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at something called conditional formatting. Conditional formatting lets us change the format or the look of a cell based on its contents. So, of course, we're looking at the number of times that each of these items comes up in this list. And, of course, it's a short list, and it's easy to sort of look and see, okay, math is comes up 4 times, so it's the most favorite subject, at least based on this survey. But we might have a really long list and a lot of numbers that vary in range, you know, from a lot more than just from 1 to 4. But when we're learning how to do something, working with a small data set makes it easier to understand. So let's go ahead and learn how conditional formatting works. We're going to change the color of these cells based on a condition, based on the size of the number in that cell. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the entire column just by clicking the letter at the top. You can see you can highlight an entire column just by clicking it. So for me, I'm going to click on column K. It has all my numbers in it. And I'm going to set up conditional formatting based on that. So to do that, I'm going to click on the word format and move down till I see the words conditional formatting. I'll click there, and by default, you can see it's showing, oh, everything from K1 to K116. I guess we have 116 rows in this spreadsheet. And it says, if it's not empty, make it green. Well, that's interesting. Only if we have a lot of empty values, and we don't in this case. We have a lot of values that are they all have values, all the interesting things. So having it highlight just being based on not empty is not a great thing. So what we're going to do instead is there are a whole bunch of different conditions we can say. We could say if the text contains something, and we could have it look for a word, or if it starts with a certain letter or ends with a certain letter, or we could look for exact text. We can look at dates before and after. But what we're going to use here is we're going to use some math, and we're going to look for numbers that are greater than or equal to a certain number. So I'm going to choose that one. And I'm going to say, I want you to highlight any number that's greater than or equal to 4. And I want you to make it green. So here we go. And the color green is already selected. And I could even make it bold if I wanted to. So I'll say done. And now any number in this column that is greater than or equal to 4 will go green. So if I was just to click down here and type in the number 5 and then click away, you'll notice it also goes bold and green. I could change that to 4. It's bold and green. I could change that to 3. And now it just goes back to normal formatting. So the formatting of these cells can change in real time as you receive data from a form, which is pretty interesting. All right, I'm going to delete that number 3 because I just put that in. And what we're going to do is highlight row K again, and we're going to add another rule. So I'm going to say add another rule. And again, it's looking from K1 to K116. I'm going to click where it says is not empty, and I'll scroll down and I'll say is greater than or equal to. And this time we'll put 3. And we'll change that formatting from green to yellow, or whatever color you want. And this time, let's make it italic. And we'll say done. So now any number that shows up on our list that's greater than or equal to 3 will show up as yellow and italic. However, that doesn't happen to 4 because 4 is already green and bold. So check this out. I'll type 1, 2, 3, and now it's green and italic, and 4, and now it's green and bold. And I'll delete that again because that's just my dummy data. All right, let's add one last rule. Now you can see in our data here, we don't have any number 2s. But let's say we did. We don't know that. Oh, I've got to make sure I highlight my whole column before I add my rule. And we'll say number is greater than or equal to 2. And maybe in this case, we'll make it an orange color. I'll say done. So you can see this rule does not get applied because there are no number 2s in this column. But again, if I go 4, 3, 2, there's our 2. It's, so we can confirm that the rule is working. 1, and the color goes away. Now what this does is it lets me quickly visually see where my highest numbers are in this list. And I can look to the column beside to see, math, it's got 4 votes, and therefore it is the most favorite subject, at least according to the people who filled out this survey. And tech is the second favorite subject, again, at least according to the people who filled out their survey. And again, working with such a small data set, you might think, well, it's silly to need to do that. But while we're learning it, it's really great to have things we can quickly confirm to make sure that they're working. All right, that's all we're going to do today. So I encourage you now to apply all of these things that you've just learned to your spreadsheet. Make sure that your lowercase column is working. Make sure you're finding all the unique values listed in the lowercase column. Use the CountIf function to count the number of times each of these items shows up in that lowercase list. And then turn on conditional formatting so that you can highlight the numbers that are particularly interesting because they're higher. Have fun, work together with your partners if you have any questions, and I will see you next class.